Joining us this morning because talk about big news over the weekend. So let's just get right to it.
I mean, it was my birthday on Saturday. That's the big news, right?
That's why we have you on this morning to talk about your birthday.
Yeah, I was actually in Nashville at an event for Garth Brooks Foundation, and I'm sitting 20 yards away from Garth and Trisha Yearwood. And my phone starts blowing up. There's a verdict. So, we're on verdict watching. There was just this disbelief. Like, there was, but there wasn't.
Right.
But I'm like, how do I sit here at this event in full makeup and not start crying right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just ask you this. I think what a lot of people are asking this morning is, why wasn't a lesser charge made available, like aggravated assault? Why wasn't that made available to the jury?
Well, and they were, for the most part. Some of them were, of course. And a lot of people are still claiming this case was overcharged to begin with. And that always bothers me. I mean, some of the lesser offenses were included and they were presented to the jury. But here's the problem. The laws in Florida support this verdict.
Oh, yeah. The stand ground law.
And I think that that's where people need to look at making changes. The sort of shoot now, explain later, and if it's a good enough explanation, you're basically going to be acquitted. And I think that's where people are really starting to look at these situations saying, okay, we need to take action so it doesn't happen again.
It's interesting yesterday, and I so commend Bishop T.D. Jakes, my pastor, because he's never really taken kind of a social issue or politics or scandals and brought them to the pulpit. But yesterday he said, I feel really led to have a discussion about this because people are hurting. And when you look at the protest and people that are speaking out, it's not just all African Americans. It's a very diverse group of people that are saying something really terrible happened. Yes, we respect the verdict.
Correct.
But there's something bigger here, and that's the laws. And you mentioned that the laws need to be addressed. The laws need to be changed.
Well, and think about how that affected everything from the beginning, because the police get to the scene. They've got a man claiming self-defense. There were issues about the evidence during the trial and how it wasn't preserved properly. So did the police from the beginning not take adequate measures, because how did they know it was going to be an international media story?
I think that's the bigger issue, really. I don't know that, for me, I don't know that it's an issue as much about race as it is about gun laws, as it is about their stand your ground law. Maybe that needs to be, readdressed.
Well, I absolutely think they're going to look at it at this point in time.
And the issue of profiling, which is not a race issue. Think about it.
Well, it is.
Let me tell you,
in
and
some
I
ways.
had an epiphany this
I want to
morning,
hear it,
and a lot of people don't like it. Okay, this is Dawn, the mom of a daughter with a 16-year-old nephew that looks just like Trayvon Martin. He's dead because he was black. And a lot of people aren't going to like me saying that. But the defense put on evidence, one of the neighbors, to show why Zimmerman was justified in his racial profiling. There had been a series of burglaries in the neighborhood committed by black
young men. Yes.
So
including one right across the street.
Exactly. So they put on the evidence to basically say this is why he was racially profiling, so it should be okay.
But don't we get back to the main issue, which is when the cops tell you we don't need you following him, and you get out of your car and you follow him anyway, you are looking for trouble, and he should have been found guilty on something just because
and here's
of that.
the problem. This means the jury believed Zimmerman's story, that at some point in time he stopped following him. And he was going back to his car.
And Trayvon came after him.
Correct. And what cracked me up was, O'Mara had that 4-minute pause in his closing arguments where he made courtrooms quiet. Trayvon had 4 minutes where we don't know what happened to attack Zimmerman. I'm like, so now he's a 17-year-old ninja assassin with
let's be fair though. He was hurt. He was injured. He had his head slammed against the Smith. So was it self-defense on Trayvon's part, or was it?
And I like to tell people, just because he had injuries doesn't mean he wasn't the aggressor. And we have to be careful with that. But like I've said before, the precedent this sets, okay? You get into a fight somehow. And believe me, Trayvon Martin was not the epitome of a great kid, never got in trouble. Why was he in Sanford in the first place? He'd gotten suspended from school for fighting and was now staying with his dad's girlfriend. But just because he's had some issues doesn't provide enough justification for his death. And I think those are the things we need to look at. Now, what happins now? Because
that's kind of where I'm thinking, because I think ultimately if we want to look at this, we can look at it as, we need to have better gun laws, we need to stop racial profiling, but I think there's two men involved in this who both from just the evidence that's been provided, kind of have ego problems. And that it's male egos going, oh, I'm not going to come at you. Well, I am going to come at you. Well, get in your car. Well, I'm going to get out of my car because I want to beat my chest and act like a man and stand my ground and protect my community. But ultimately, a 17-year-old boy was left dead. And
Correct.
George Zimmerman will probably will never be able to live his life the way he wants to, even though he's going to be set free. He's never going to feel safe.
And now he has
groups
a gun.
are probably going to come out.
And he's never going to feel safe, and he has a gun.
And he still has the gun. He got the gun back that he used in the shooting.
And it's just sad that like a split moment of male ego or whatever you want to call it is leaving a family without a child and is leaving George Zimmerman free with a gun with potential groups that are going to want to, I mean, he's going to have to be looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life. Not that I feel sorry for him.
I want to ask this question to everybody. Say you're in a situation as a woman, as a teenage kid, whatever. Of course, Trayvon's 6'2", so it's maybe not
6 feet.
6 feet tall.
5'11", 6 feet.
It's probably not a good analogy, but say you're out and somebody approaches you, and you are worried about your safety. Say they attack you. You want to defend yourself. You have a gun. You can use your gun.
Absolutely.
So he was justified in using his gun if he thought that he was defending his life. But that's probably what the jury said.
He went after. He pursued him initially.
But
that's
if you believe his story, he pursued him initially, and then he said, then I stopped because they told me to stop, and then Trayvon came after me. So if you believe his story, which the jury obviously did,
correct.
That's the other side of the coin here.
And a lot of people are saying just that. So, and
I was going to say I was the victim of a crime. I was robbed at gunpoint. Now, I didn't have a gun on me, but during that moment, all I wanted to do was run. We're women. We react to things like that much differently than men do. Men are much more protective. I would say women are much more protective of their children.
Sure.
Yeah.
So from here going on, okay, a lot of people have said, can you appeal this? No, you can't appeal this acquittal.
That's double jeopardy.
He's not going to be charged again for something smaller.
They can't do like an unlawful or wrongful death. They can't come back.
Okay,
that's a civil trial.
That's a civil trial.
And there's some issues that come up here in a civil trial, which I think is very interesting. George Zimmerman would probably have to get on the stand. Then you're talking about proving your case beyond a preponderance of the evidence.
Instead of a reasonable doubt.
And it's
very different.
And it's easier. But if they put George Zimmerman on the stand, then we're going to see Trayvon tried all over again, and they'll bring in his weed smoking and everything else.
And the parents are saying, they're not sure, at least the people speaking for the parents aren't really sure if they want that to happen.
Well, because George Zimmerman doesn't have anything. And so if you're suing someone for wrongful death, you're talking about money. It happened in the OJ trial.
I remember that.
After he was acquitted,
and
Nicole
won.
Brown Simpson's family sued, and they received a big judgment. George Zimmerman doesn't have anything.
Right, so there's never any jail time associated with the civil case.
Now, what about they're saying that George does, that there's this huge fund that was raised for him. Is that correct?
This George Zimmerman defense fund. Now remember, here, watch this, that might happen. His wife was arrested for perjury. You'll remember during all the bail hearings, she sort of misrepresented what their financial situation was because the defense fund had raised all this money, and she goes in and says they're indigent, they don't have any money. Those charges are still pending, you guys. She still has to deal with those perjury charges. You can't go to jail for perjury. Wow. What if she ends up jail for perjuring herself?
That's why she was crying Saturday night. She's like, this ain't over yet.
It's not over. It's not over. And I've heard some rumblings that George Zimmerman is considering legal action against the prosecutor.
He's also considering going to law school to be an attorney, which is interesting because, surely after being through this firsthand, he sees something that
and
really
apparently he's got a lot of people that will hire him if he does.
Really?
Yeah, he's got some huge supporters with a lot of financial support.
And again, just to show the other side of it, the jury found him not guilty.
And let's be clear, I'm all about defending yourself, but we have to make sure we define what's appropriate self-defense. And I'm not sure that these are the results we want.
Right. I think that's a good point.
Do you think the criminal justice department will get involved?
In terms of,
it's been discussions like the NAACP is calling for them to take this case on.
Like the Department of Justice looking at civil rights violations. They're going to have a hard time. They're going to need to prove that George Zimmerman acted back to that ill intent, that he was somehow targeting Trayvon Martin because he was black. And if they had a hard enough time doing it in this criminal prosecution, they're going to have a really, really hard time doing that. I think we would have seen something happen already.
Would the grand jury have ever let this go to trial? Had they?
In Florida, I don't know. In another state, maybe. Who knows?
Well, I think we can what if and go back and forth
Yeah.
and slice and
Every
dice
day,
this
all
all we
day.
Well,
want,
and
but-
still, we're going to see new details come out. Dawn, thank you so much
You're
for
so
being with us
welcome.
this morning. Always love your insight on things. Okay.